legislation joins a public awareness campaign all aimed at helping those struggling in domestic violence situations. We'll hear from a state official on the impact these steps will have. Hi everybody and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. New legislation signed into law just this week, looking to do more to help to keep the personal information of domestic abuse survivors private. Governor Hochul signing the legislation during Domestic Violence Awareness Week. 3 of the 5 bills signed keep the information of domestic abuse victims private to keep abusers from stalking their former partners. This includes allowing the sealing of voter information and letting survivors opt out of making payments on joint utility bills. The other 2 bills remove guns from domestic violence defendants.
And we're going to continue to do everything we can to keep people out of harm's way and give them flexibility to make the best decisions for themselves and their families and just literally give them a new lease in life.
All right, joining us now to give us some additional details on the new legislation and Domestic Violence Week is Kelly Owens. Kelly is the Executive Director at the State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, if I could get you to kind of define how does, and I know there's some different verbiage out there, let's start with how New York State defines domestic violence.
Domestic violence, from our perspective at OPDV, is a pattern of abusive behavior between intimate partners. There's legal definitions, and there's a lot of ways of looking at this, but it's really a pattern of abuse between intimate partners for the purpose of controlling that partner.
According to the most recent numbers here from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, when it comes to New York State, 31.7% of New York women and 29% of New York men experience intimate partner physical violence or sexual violence in their lifetimes. Is that something you find to be true here?
Yeah, we believe in those same statistics that's true, and I think that what that tells us is that everybody knows somebody who's impacted by domestic violence. Everybody. So it really is a societal issue that we need to solve.
And also found here, which I found astonishing, that on a typical day, local domestic violence hotlines receive approximately 19,100 calls and approximately 13 calls every minute. Now this is across the U.S. We know what problem it is. What has New York done now with this latest package of bills to just be signed into law by Governor Hochul?
Yeah, so some of the things that we don't think about when we think about domestic violence are some of the things that are addressed in these bills, like financial abuse. Often, in fact, about 99% of domestic violence cases, there's an issue of financial abuse, somebody controlling somebody's money or somebody's financial power. So one of the bills talks about utility bills and the ability for somebody who's in an abusive relationship to get out of a contract. Often, if somebody has to move into a new home and their utility bill has not been paid by their abuser, they can't, and they're on that contract, they can't get into a new home. So that's a bill that's really, really important. Also, if someone is in an abusive relationship and is out and somebody continues to stalk them, they can have access to some government records, and one of those is the Board of Elections. You can find out where somebody was registered to vote. So that bill now protects them from being able to find you through your election records. And another one is it really talks about how if you are on someone's health insurance and you get those explanation of benefits into your house, and oftentimes somebody who's leaving continues to be on someone else's insurance, and if somebody's going for medical treatment in regards to their abuse or medical treatment in regards to their reproductive health, that will no longer, they can opt out of that so that the information doesn't go to their abuser.
I think that point about sealing that personal information and protecting that personal information, and to think that somebody would have the forethought to look for somebody through voter rolls and registration is just astonishing to me. But that is a huge step into helping these people feel safe.
Yeah, it really is. I think people don't realize what you're saying, right? That people who are in these abusive and controlling relationships will go to any depth they can to find you if they want to hurt you.
One of the other laws, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, in regards to firearms as well, once there is a order of protection in place, that any firearms in that home, that they can now be removed. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And if there's a refusal on the part of the perpetrator to do that, the court now can mandate that those guns be turned over.
A lot of resources available. We've had that hotline number up there on the screen for folks. We know recently here, at least in the capital region, lots of help out there. In fact, we ran a story here locally in Albany that there's a new Unity House facility opening up over in a North Troy neighborhood. Can you talk to me about the resources that are available here for victims to take advantage of?
Yeah, you know, we have great providers both in the Albany area around domestic and sexual violence that have long histories in providing services. You know, one of the main things that people look for when they're leaving is how do they get to stable housing. And Unity House, the YWCA's, Equinox can all help people find their way to safety. And those organizations have a long history and a great track record of helping victims and survivors of domestic violence find safety. And
for our viewers elsewhere around the state, all they have to do is reach out to that hotline number to find everything that's available to them where they live.
Yep, every county has a domestic and sexual violence provider, and they can reach out to that hotline. That's the statewide hotline, and they will help you find safety.
Kelly, what's the one thing, the most common thread you hear from people involved in relationships like this? You often hear about people talking, well, why don't they just leave? What is the one thing you hear from people that makes them not want to leave or not want to seek the help?
I don't think there's any one thing. Every relationship is really complicated. But I think for us, when we're asking that of ourselves about someone, we really should be asking, okay, maybe this person is dependent on the child care that's provided by the abuser's family. Maybe this person has children who continue to need insurance coverage from their abuser. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people stay. And what we also know is that when somebody goes to leave, that becomes the most dangerous for them.
You know, we talk about Domestic Violence Awareness Week, even month, but this is an issue, Kelly, that really deserves the attention year-round.
Agreed. Here at OPDV and in the DV world, we think about it all year-round, and we hope that all of you, the information that gets shared during Domestic Violence Awareness Month will be there for you when you need it.
Again, the hotline number is there. Where can folks go online? Where can we direct them through your state resources?
Yep, if you go to opdv.ny.gov, you'll see a list of our resources. Also, there's a 24-hour chat line that people can access if they don't feel comfortable having those conversations on the phone.
And that number there on the screen, 1-800-942-6906. Reach out anytime, a day or night?
Anytime, day or night. There's a trained advocate on the phone waiting for you.
Awesome. Kelly Owens, Executive Director, State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Thank you so much for your time today, Kelly. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Coming up here on Empire State Weekly, a labor vote in the capital region put an end to unionization efforts at an Amazon warehouse. When we return, unionizers say they aren't done yet. Hear from an expert on what might happen next. And remember, if you have a comment, story idea, please let us know. Reach out to us on email, empirestateweekly@gmail.com, or find us on Twitter. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. Workers at an Amazon warehouse here in the capital region failing to form a union this past week. That vote failed by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. In total, more than 900 employees voted, with only 206 voting in favor. The failure follows a successful effort to unionize at that warehouse on Staten Island. The Amazon push, coming after several Starbucks locations across the state, successfully led campaigns to unionize. And while it didn't come together this time, Amazon workers say their fight isn't over and they'll keep pushing.
8 months ago, when I started at Amazon, the word union was forbidden. It wasn't allowed. It meant immediate termination. And here we are today. Hundreds of people have spoken out. Hundreds of people have used the word union on a daily basis. And we will continue to focus on the word union.
All right, joining us now to break down the legal recourse here these unionizers may have is Ryan McCall. Ryan's a partner with Tully Rinke Law Firm. Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about just kind of as a whole here when we're looking at New York State, often referred to as a union-friendly state. When it comes to the law, what does that mean as far as workers' rights here?
So in situations like this, anytime a organization or individuals in an organization are seeking to form a union, they typically need to acquire about 30% of the eligible employees to be on board with that. Following that vote, they would then be able to bring it to an actual election where they would be able to vote on actually whether or not to certify the election and bring forth a new union.
And once they do that, of course, that's when the National Labor Relations Board, and those representatives here or wherever that may be taking place, they're the ones that actually count up those votes then.
Correct. So specifically in this situation, the vote was denied by virtually an overwhelming majority. So from this point now, it moves up to the National Labor Relations Board. They're going to have the ultimate final decision on whether or not to actually certify this vote and make sure that this was a proper election.
Now, we've seen in a lot of instances here, especially when it comes to Amazon and even Starbucks, and a lot of Starbucks locations around the state have been successful in forming unions, but a lot of times corporate staunchly against their employees forming a union and take efforts to kind of squash that, if you will. How legal is that, and what can the company do as far as bringing in, from what we've heard in some instances, outside firms to try to mingle with employees to kind of get them to vote no against unionizing?
So it really is a gray area. When it comes to matters like this, employers do have some latitude in order to encourage employees not to vote with the union. Specifically, going back to the Amazon example, they did raise their local wages for eligible employees. So they do put some things in place in order to maybe make it less palatable to vote for the union, but ultimately it is the employee's final decision.
But as far as actually hiring people from an outside firm that come in and say they're working on behalf of Amazon and whoever it may be, you're saying that's the gray area there?
Yeah, that's really where the gray area would be. Again, it really depends. Is this something done with the intention to let's try and force our workers to not join a union, or is this something where we're simply trying to discourage it? That's really where the gray area can come in.
Right, and Heather Goodall, the woman, the Amazon employee here at the recent vote here in the Capital Region at the Skodak facility, who kind of led the charge here, she cited that $1 a raise that put into place here before that vote. She saw that as kind of a win for them. But she also said she pledged to pursue what she claims are labor law violations. Now, she didn't get any more specific, but what might she be referring to there?
So there's a few different examples which have been used previously, which is unreasonable demands on employees, some threatening tactics, basically saying that if you agree to even go near this union or go near the vote, you could be terminated. Certain things like that could be viewed as retaliatory, which could end up painting Amazon in a bad light and may give some credence to the people trying to overturn the vote.
And that is determined simply by, making a claim, getting legal representation, and then, going in and possibly interviewing other employees to see if those claims are actually true or not.
That's correct, especially in this case where I noticed some of the allegations where there was fake voters that were going in to vote. I'm not necessarily sure how much that will come into play, but if that was something that is alleged and is found to be true, that could be a very serious problem for Amazon.
Now, nationally, when we look at numbers nationally, unions certainly aren't as strong as they once were. At their peak back in 1954, 35% of all wage and salaried workers were a member of a union. That has tumbled now, I think, to the latest Bureau of Labor statistics taken back in 2021, just 10% now. of wage and salary workers across the country are part of a union. What in your opinion, do you think has led to less of a union attitude, if you will, amongst workers?
So I really think it's twofold. I think that there's a lot of times where you're beginning to see places like Amazon offer better packages, where they're raising wages, they're including paid for tuition, things of that nature, which may not have necessarily been an issue in previous years. Now, when you look at places like Amazon, they have workers that are going to college. There's fringe benefits that can be given to them that weren't present previously, which I think is somewhat being put forth here, which may lead to less likelihood of moving forward with a union. And then I think the other issue you can look into is simply a need from the employee's perspective. A lot of times, Amazon and other larger employers can sit there and say, well, if you want to move forward with a union, there may be less benefits that are available to you, which can also lead to that sort of mentality.
Right, and that vote was shot down by nearly 2-to-1 margin, and some of the people who were quoted in a Times Union article here about it in Albany saying some of the things you just said there. You know, this isn't a career. These are warehouse positions, and some of the folks saying, look, I got health benefits on day one, and you know, considering the skills involved with the job, it compensates pretty well.
And I would agree. It really all depends on the individual's situation, which, again, moving back to it, I do think that you're beginning to see more of a likelihood towards these people pursuing second careers, and places like Amazon and other larger employers are beginning to help with that, which may not have been present years ago.
We'll be keeping an eye on it, because if the organizers have their way, they say they are not done yet here with those efforts. Ryan McCall from Tully Rinke, we appreciate your time. Ryan, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Moving forward here, officials continue to make a big push for chip manufacturing in New York State. We'll break down the new proposals that officials say could make New York companies leaders in the emerging industry. And as always, if you've got a comment, story idea you'd like us to follow up on, let us know. Email EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com or seek us out on Twitter. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly here in Albany. I'm Ryan Peterson. The CHIPS and Science Act has become law now. Federal dollars are going towards chip manufacturing around the state of New York. Senator Chuck Schumer visiting Albany's nanotech complex this week. Capitol correspondent Jamie DeLine brings us the details on a new proposal he announced to further strengthen the industry.
From the Capital Region to the Hudson Valley and soon Central New York, New York State is becoming one of the major hubs of chip manufacturing. Now that more chips will be produced here in New York State, Senator Chuck Schumer wants to make sure that companies that do business with the federal government limit the use of semiconductor chips made in China.
I am proposing in this year's Defense Authorization Bill, the NDAA, that when the federal government is buying a product or service, we block the use of chips from 3 of the biggest and most dangerous Chinese companies in the game: SMIC, CXMT, and YMTC.
He says having these Chinese-made chips in the federal supply chain is a direct threat to national security and economic security. Schumer's proposal comes just weeks after 3 major tech manufacturing announcements in Syracuse, Poughkeepsie, and the Capital Region.
As we look at the CHIPS Act, there's 2 elements: the manufacturing piece and the R&D piece. And so the research and development part is the area that we're most interested in, and that calls for development of a national semiconductor technology center. And we would like that national technology center to be here at Albany Nanotech.
I asked the senator when New York State will really start to see this industry boom.
The administration, I know because I talk to them regularly, wants to move very, very quickly to get the dollars of the chip fab dollars out, and the investment tax credit occurs automatically when they can use both. We made sure in the legislation they can use both together. So it's going to happen quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few months we start seeing some grants issued.
In Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Our thanks to Jamie. All right, stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. Remember, got a comment, story idea you'd like us to follow up on? Let us know. Email EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com or seek us out on Twitter. Welcome back. Finally here on Empire State Weekly, we are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day for those statewide midterm elections. A recent poll from the Santa College Research Institute shows Republican gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin closing the gap for voters when compared to incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul. According to that poll of likely voters, 52% of them say they would support Hochul, 41% say they would support Zeldin. We'll be sure to update you on those polls and the key issues heading into Election Day just a few weeks from now. From all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm Ryan Peterson in Albany. We'll see you back here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's our full schedule of where you can find us on 10 television stations across New York.